Welcome. My name is Olivia Mattis. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's program about the Jewish hero and partisan leader and poet, Abba Kovner. I'm welcoming you on behalf of two organizations, my own organization, which is the Sousa Mendes Foundation, and our partner organization for today's program, which is the Jewish Partisan Educational Foundation. And I love that organization. This is our second program with them, and I hope there'll be more to come. The Sousa Mendes Foundation is devoted to honoring a hero and rescuer of World War II, Aristides de Sousa Mendes, who was the Portuguese consul general in Bordeaux, France in 1940. He gave visas to fleeing refugees so they could enter Portugal and from there find safe haven elsewhere on the globe. And since the beginning of the COVID period, we have been running programs every Sunday on beautiful stories of rescue and resistance. And today is one such beautiful story. And I hope you saw the very important film, Partisans of Vilna. So now it's my pleasure and privilege to hand the floor to my co-host for today's hour, Jonathan First from the Jewish Partisan Educational Foundation. Jonathan, why don't you unmute yourself and welcome.
Thank you, Olivia. We're so honored to co-host this event with the Sousa Mendes Foundation, and the work that you do is so very important. So thank you for having us be partners with you today. As Olivia mentioned, my name is Jonathan First. I'm the Education Director for the Jewish Partisan Educational Foundation. JPEF is dedicated to preserving and teaching the inspiring history of Jewish resistance during the Holocaust. And we focus in particular on armed Jewish resistance during the Holocaust. We produce films, curricula, and online teacher trainings about the 30,000 Jews who fought back against the Nazis as Jewish partisans, organized resistance fighters behind enemy lines. You can access all of our materials for free online at www.jewishpartisans.org, where you'll also find profiles and photos of more than 50 Jewish partisans, including profiles with photos and a biography of Abba Kovner and fellow Avenger Vitka Kovner, who you will also hear about in today's presentation. So you'll find the links in the chat. And it is now my pleasure to introduce our distinguished panel. Our moderator, Dr. Mordechai Paldiel, serves on the board of the Sousa Mendes Foundation. He was the director of the Department for the Righteous at Yad Vashem for 24 years, and he currently teaches at Yeshiva University. And we are so honored to be joined today by Professor Dina Porat, speaking with us today from Israel. Professor Porat is the chief historian at Yad Vashem. She is the author of numerous books, two of them on Abba Kovner, including Vengeance and Recompense Are Mine, The Yishuv, The Holocaust, and Abba Kovner's Avengers Group. And that was published in 2019 in Israel and will be available in English next year. We are further honored to be joined today from Israel by Michael Kovner, son of Abba Kovner and Vitka Kovner. Mr. Kovner is a celebrated Israeli painter who studied with the American artist Philip Guston at the New York Studio School. He wrote and illustrated the graphic novel Ezekiel's World, based on the life and work of Abba Kovner. Mordechai, thank you for facilitating this conversation with our wonderful guests.
Hello. In today's meeting, we will talk about Abba Kovner, a person who had a great impact on transmitting the message of the Holocaust, especially in Israel. We will highlight three main items among the others for which he is best known. Number one, the manifesto that he issued in January 1942, the first of its kind, in which he foretold that what was happening in the nearby Ponari forest, where thousands of Jews were being shot to death, was not an isolated and localized horrific event, but was part of an official Nazi policy to exterminate all the Jews of Europe. And therefore, the only response to that was resistance. In other words, to die with honor. that this was the only honorable option left to the Jewish people. Number two, resistance. For this purpose, Abba Kovner created an armed underground organization inside the Vilna ghetto that he hoped would lead to an armed rebellion inside the ghetto. When this did not materialize, he escaped with his group of fighters into the nearby forest and acted as partisans until the liberation of Vilna in July 1944. Finally, number three, the idea of revenge and retribution. In Hebrew, we call it nakam, which is also what Abba Kovner termed it. Kovner felt that in light of the immensity of the Holocaust, there should be consequences for the German people so that no other nation will ever again try to reenact something similar to what the Germans orchestrated Holocaust of the Jews did during World War II. How did that work out? For more on all this, I turn the floor over to the distinguished Professor Dina Porat. Bevakasha.
Thank you. Toda raba. Thank you, the organizers from these two distinguished organizations. Thank you, Mordechai, Dr. Padiel, for being the moderator. And thank you everyone who is joining. I can see on the screen that we already have some more than 180 people. Welcome everyone. Mordechai, when you highlighted the main themes, you as if gave me the line which I will now follow. First, let me say that Abba Kovner was really an extraordinary man, figure, leader, a gifted orator, spoke a few languages, especially Hebrew and the Yiddish, which were ausgezeichnet, he was a master of speaking, of writing. He was a man people followed and people listened to. He also got backfire from people who did not disagree or people who followed him after his, or thanks to his ideas. And when ideas did not materialize, were disappointed. But this is how great men are. They are either worshipped or sometimes attacked. So really an extraordinary figure. I would say that when one takes a look at his life and his achievements in life, this suffices for a number of biographies, for a number of persons, and not just one. Let me now indeed take the points that you have highlighted, Mordechai, and elaborate on them. And I allow myself to speak about him because I have written his biography, which is called in English, The Fall of a Sparrow. And I can tell you that the 5 years I have written it, each morning I got up in the morning, it said, Dinale, where do you take the chutzpah from to write about a person such as Abba Kovner? But there you are. The biography is there, but it was with awe and respect that it was written. Now, we will not devote time to his childhood, first years. We will go right into the time after the German occupation of Lithuania, where he is with his comrades, especially from the Hashomer HaTzair, a leftist socialist movement. And let me say that right now, June 22nd, we mentioned 80 years to the German invasion into Lithuania. Killing started right away, persecution, a legislation against the rights of Jews, depriving them of rights. Abba Kovner and a number of friends, about 30 of them, hide in a monastery close to Vilna. Now, he emphasized with his modesty and his sense of historical accuracy that he was not the only one to understand that there is a German systematic plan to kill all Jews of Europe. It was a hunch, a feeling that accumulated among members of his youth movement, among other youth movements, and he was the one who gave this feeling the words. He wrote down a manifesto calling for resistance, which we will read out in a few minutes. So I would say that had Kovner only written this manifesto, his place in history would have secured. But he went on to, with friends from a number of movements, to establish together under their commander a sizable and very well organized underground in the ghetto, which is another major achievement. It didn't work out because, let's put it this way, people hope, people live as long as there is some hope for life. And rebelling meant in a minute, all the Germans coming in and killing all of them easily. There was no proportion. They were like a mosquito on the back of an elephant. But Abba Kovner understood it. And he understood, and then he wrote another manifesto, one which we will not read today. When he understood that the ghetto population is not up to a rebellion, is more up to seizing to the hope that they will be sent to working camps, concentration camps, and will be spared, which they were not, which were obviously were not. Abba Kovner, after living through the sewage canals to the forest, he was in the forest a commander of 4 Jewish battalions, a phenomenon unheard of and unseen in the Soviet Partisan camp, but he was. Then after liberating Vilna, he tried to gather not only the survivors, but the lost treasures, lost and hidden cultural treasures of Vilna. He founded the first line of escape down from Vilna to the Mediterranean on the way to the land of Israel, and hundreds and thousands followed. And he then put them in the good hands of the Jewish Brigade, and which was stationed in Italy, and started to build a plan for revenge. Mordechai, you quite rightly said that the main idea of revenge was not just to punish the Germans, who went unpunished. Nuremberg trials punished just the leadership. Where is the German people? Its responsibility. He wanted a revenge of a nation from a nation, the Jewish nation from the German nation. He wanted justice. It's not just punishment. He saw that the world is going on. Germany is being rebuilt. The prisoners are going out of camps where they sat under the Allies. The Holocaust is being forgotten. Such a crime, and no real plan for a memory, for a punishment, nothing. So it was punishment, it was justice, and it was a warning that if 6 million Germans would be killed, then a warning would be issued to all other nations, and whoever would think of hurting Jews again will rethink. Let me read to you now. It was mentioned that he also was a poet, a very good one, an author. His book on the War of Independence was a #1 bestseller for a number of years. And I would like to read to you only 2 stanzas from his poems. And I see them here. You see, I took them from his poem, My Little Sister, for which he got the Israel Prize. And the first of them says, I vow by you today, we will not speak for better or for worse of a ruined world, but terror. How will this passage of our lives be told now? In other words, he wrote about the Holocaust. He spoke about it. He never wrote a comprehensive book. And what he says here is that he vows not to speak about it comprehensively because it is so difficult to understand for a person who was not there. Then there is another one, another stanza I took, and this is from the beginning of the poem, when he speaks about those who came to the wall of the monastery, came up to the wall, the iron ring of the chain caught in a chunk of ice. Please pay attention to the ice. They seized it, rubbed it with clutching the face of a frozen, like clutching the face of a frozen man, frozen, until the morning light, with invocations, with whipping nails, scratching, whipping nails, begged the voice of the bell to break from the frost, again, frost, ice, from the killing silence, and the iron did not shake or tremble. In other words, here is where Kovner is accusing outright Christianity and Europe, Christian Europe, for perpetrating the Holocaust, for not moving, for not trembling, for the ice and the frost not defrosting vis-a-vis the terrible suffering. I will use the few more minutes I have to tell you just a bit about Abba Kovner following the war. Following the war, he again turned to be a leader, a person whose opinion was heard. He was a member of a movement, of a party, but he was always a one-person fraction with independent opinions about the evils of Soviet Russia, about how the kibbutz movement should organize itself. He was considered the Rebbe of the kibbutz, the rabbi of the kibbutz, a socialist leftist kibbutz, but he instilled Judaism and Jewish tradition and ceremonies into it in a beautiful way that was accepted by all these leftist members. He built a major museum, the Diaspora Museum, today it's called ANU, in which he said, while building it, that the Israeli idea of teaching the first and second temple, then skipping 2,000 years of Jewish exile, and then coming back to teach Zionism and the coming back to the land of Israel. This is not unacceptable. 2,000 years of Jewish creativity in the exile, in the diaspora, are to be respected. And so are all Jews living in the diaspora, respected and told about. And this is how we built the Diaspora Museum in a most skillful, original manner. He was also instrumental during the War of Independence. He was, as we said, an author, a writer. He was I'm sure Michael would agree with me. Michael will show you the little hut in his kibbutz, Ein Hahoresh, where he worked and wrote and drew. He originally, by the way, studied in Vilna sculpture and painting. And Michael would, I think, agree that he was working every minute. He was creating and working, writing plays and books and going to lecture and to answer questions and be the Rebbe of the kibbutz. Active, full, rich, extraordinary life. Let me please show you a number, or please watch with me, a number of slides, a number of photos that highlight what we have said. Here on the left is Abba Kovner, dressed as a partisan, of course, with a weapon in his hands. And here he is on the right. This is, and you see ruins behind him. This is how he came from the forest to ruined Vilna. And on the right, you can see him. He enters the place that used to be the headquarters of the underground. And he's sitting there, and the picture, the photo, exemplifies the loss and the emptiness. Let me say that these photos and two more that you would see are among the few that we have, because thanks to Ilya Ehrenburg, the writer, author, journalist, a very famous one during World War II, read practically by every soldier in the vast Red Army. Ehrenburg took a unit of photographers, went from one place to another, and met the partisans who came to liberate Vilna. And thanks to that, we have these photos. Okay, here is another one. Here you can see the main group of the partisans who emerged at that moment, as we said, from the forest to liberate the city, and where their photo was taken by this Red Army photographers unit. There is one more, please. Yeah, these are on the left, Rushka Korchak, in the middle, Abba Kovner, the same, you see, it's on the same occasion, he's wearing the same clothes, and on his right, Vitka Kempner Kovner. I knew both quite closely, both Rushka and Vitka, and I can tell you, these are extraordinary ladies, valor, courage, dedication. Vitka Kempner was a lady, what can I say? When God made the mold to make Vitka Kovner, he forgot to put fear inside. A fearless partisan and an extraordinary, clever, and well-contained lady. We will finish with Abba Kovner's manifesto, the one we spoke about. Its title is Jews. Let us not go like sheep to the slaughter. Let us not go like sheep to the slaughter. He doesn't speak against the Jews or accuse them. It's a we are together. Never to be, Jews in the diaspora should never be ashamed. We, the youngsters, the underground, and them, we are one, and we shouldn't go like sheep to the slaughter. Jewish youth, do not trust those who are trying to deceive you. And here he speaks about Ponar, the killing site outside Vilna, and he's trying to tear the illusion that those who went out of the gates of the ghetto will ever come back. It's an illusion. And he says, we will not be led like sheep to the slaughter. True, we are weak and defenseless, but the only reply to the murderer is revolt. Because if there is a systematic plan to kill everyone, then we are doomed. And he finishes by saying, brothers, better fall as free fighters than live at our murderer's mercy. Resist to the last breath. 1st of January, 1942, Vilna, in the ghetto. I thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Professor Porat. Professor Porat mentioned the convent. So where does the convent come in here? Well, when Abba Kovner created the underground organization in Vilna for a time, and the Germans began massacring Jews in the Ponari forest, he needed a place to hide with his fellow underground persons. And it's a long story, but he spent a few months in a convent outside of Vilna, about 10 miles outside of Vilna. And the mother superior of that convent was an extraordinary nun called Anna Barkowska. And he was there dressed up as a nun, he and his fellow conspirators. And Anna Barkowska in 1984 was honored by Yad Vashem as a righteous among the nations. And I was there and I was instrumental in having her honored. She was still alive. She was living in Warsaw. And Abba Kovner, when he learned about this, he went to Warsaw in order to present her with the honors, with the Yad Vashem honors of a medal and certificate of honor. And then 2 years later, 1986, he came to Yad Vashem. I invited him to come, and he planted a tree in the name of Anna Barkowska. And there is a photo of me in 1986, if you want to show it, showing where I am calling upon Abba Kovner to step forward. It's a very cold day in March, and very windy. Abba Kovner is looking at me, and I'm pointing out to the place where he should plant the tree in the name of Anna Barkowska. He was then already very ill, and he died soon afterwards. So that's the story of Abba Kovner and the convent, which was headed by Anna Barkowska. I just want to say that Anna Barkowska was an unusual nun. When Abba Kovner went back to the Vilna ghetto, she wanted to join him, and he had to dissuade her and say, you stay behind, but help us. How? By smuggling in ammunition. And she came one day to the gates of the ghetto with 2 grenades hidden under her robe, which she smuggled in to Abba Kovner. And she also told him how to activate these grenades. Somehow she knew she was told. So very unusual for a Catholic nun. So that is the story of the convent. Now I turn to Michael or Michael, son of Abba Kovner. And Michael, we would like to hear from you on Abba Kovner as a father. What sort of relationship, Michael, did you have with your legendary father, as well as your equally legendary mother, Vitka Kovner? Did they discuss with you what happened in Vilna? Did they talk with you about this very traumatic period, or very little? Go ahead, Michal. Speak.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to this program. I'm very exciting to talk about my father, and that so many people now know about him. The first time, I guess many people, the first time they know about his story. But I will want to tell his story from a different point of view. So now maybe you'll see a minute of a video, which based on, it's a theater show, which based on my graphic novel. It's here, this is my graphic novel. It's called the Ezekiel Word. It's about my father.
צלצל בימינך בפעמון הקטן, איתך אני עד לילה.
אל תבכה בי, היה העין, צלצל בימינך בפעמון הקטן, איתך אני עד לילה. אל תבכה בני, היה העין, צלצל בימינך בפעמון הקטן, איתך אני עד לילה.
להישאר מלך, ולו מלך ללכת עם בני אדם כמותכם. לא להיות ארץ שאת פניה מעברים בבולדוזר, נבערת מחלום, מסוד מגע חומק, מקולות יער. לבוא אל מקום היעדרנו, להדליק נר חלב דק במרחב נטוש, לעכב את הקריאה, ולא בלי אומץ לב ראוי לומר, שוב שובה והנחני נא, שלא אקיץ בודד וזר בין כותלי ביתי אשר בדמי בניתי.
Now you saw a little bit of this theater show, and now I'll show you few pictures, only 3 pictures of me, my father, my mother. And this picture that you are going to see now is a picture when I was 6 years old, and in the kibbutz. And my father wrote this poem for me when I was in this age. And this poem expresses something that you see in the picture. It's for them after the Holocaust, after the war. It's to live in the kibbutz and to have a child. It's like to bring hope to life again, to start living like regular people and to enjoy the life like life it is. But my father never forgot what's happened. He put his energy, his life, his poetry for what happened over there. And he thought you shouldn't forget. There's something that you should have, you should carry it all the time when you are alive. And he, in a way, was a voice for the people who didn't have the voice. So now you see the picture when he was about 68. This is a picture of my mother and my father. When he was 68, she was about 66. And it's about 2 years before he died. And this picture, you saw him about the same year. He's sitting in front of the little house, which is this little house was the end of the kibbutz. And that's a place when he wrote. That's a place when he came and write his poem. Everyday life, he lived like a regular person. He worked in the kibbutz, he worked in the kitchen. He was very alive person, was very involved in the kibbutz movement, in the community life. But when he went to this little hut, that was a place when he saw the things which happened to him and the voices of the people which didn't have the luck to stay alive. And he felt that he owed to them to speak with his voice for their voice which didn't have a place. Okay, now I will read the poem which he wrote when he was 50, I think. No one will carry my mother beer with me. No one will come close to my mother beer with me. Come to the vast plain, lead your eyes to the white river. It scoop out its channel and shoves like the prow of a heavy ship in the ice. And say with me, Imi, Imi. In Hebrew, Imi, it's with me, and Imi is my mother. This poem express is inside a very intimate feeling that is carry all of his life. He carried his mother beer, and he said, no one will carry it with me. This is a heavy bag that is carry all of his life. And you'll see the few pages from the book. So I speak about it in the book. I show in the book, in these pages, that's the last day of the ghetto. And it was problematic, this uprising. The German came to the ghetto, they start to shoot, the German understood what's happened, they went back from the ghetto and they bring the Jewish police to make the dirty work. So for the fighter, it was a dilemma what to do. If they will continue the fighting, that means that they will kill a Jewish policeman. And for my father, that was a red line. He said, never Jews will kill Jews. So this dilemma was the worst for him, because that was his dream, that they will fight against the German, and they found the situation that they will fight against their own people. So in the end, they decided to leave the ghetto, to go through the Suez Canal. When they came to the pier, many people from the ghetto came and asked them to take them with them. So my father said, no one will come with us, only people who has gun. The parents of the fighter came and asked them, take us, we are our parents. My grandmother, my father's mother came to him and she told him, what's about me? And he said, for you, I don't have an answer. So for him, that's a poem that I wrote before. That was his, I think, the strongest and the heaviest bag that he carried all of his life. In my book, what I want to talk about the book, because in my book, I want to express my father as a fragile man. He's an old man, he needs help, and he lives alone in this little apartment. For many people who knows him, he's a big hero and he's a man so big, bigger than life. But for me, and the way I want to express it is more like a father and a poet. And the father is very gentle and very taking care for everything for me, for my mother. He cleans the house, he cooked, everything he did to make other people be happy. And for a poet, you cannot be a poet and be with such a big idea and strong idea. You have to be very sensitive to life. And because you are very sensitive to life, you are in a way a broken person. And he loved very much one man which called Menachem Mendel Mikotz. He's a rabbi, very important rabbi in the Hasidic movement. And Menachem Mendel Mikotz said, there is nothing so complete like broken Jewish heart. And for him, that's a way I want to express his idea or his personality. He told me many times that the Jewish has broken tablet and complete tablet. And for him, every Jewish person has to carry inside of his heart those broken tablet and the complete tablet. So to be a broken man, it doesn't mean to be depressed, but you have to live with this broken idea inside your life. And that's the main thing that I want to express about him. And the last thing that I want to say is that my father was a kibbutznik. It's very much against his type because it's very individualistic. And this kibbutz was very socialistic kibbutz. And he was in a way very nationalistic person. But he preferred to live in the kibbutz because he believes the kibbutz, it's not against Judaism, it's a new Judaism. It's a revolution in Judaism. In the kibbutz, you can express the way he can express his real idea, what he thinks about Judaism, and he put a lot of energy to make the holiday very beautiful and exciting and full of joy, but connected to the Jewish tradition. So in the kibbutz, he saw an opportunity to change Judaism to the idea that he wants to do it. For him, that's the last word that I want to say, for him, Judaism, it's the most important thing in his life. But he said, I belong to people which is failure is bigger than his success. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael Kovner. So now I'm going to invite my co-host, Jonathan First from JPEF, to gather some of your questions from the chat box and to ask them of our panel. Afterwards, we'll have a little discussion with our moderator, Dr. Mordechai Paldiel, but right now, audience questions.
We have so many questions. We're only going to have time for a few. I want to start off with a question that Sheila, or if I'm getting the pronunciation right, if I'm not, apologies. Do you think that that Abba and Vitka's opportunity and the opportunity of all the Jewish partisans to be a resistor at that level of activity, how did it help Abba in particular and Vitka in particular, how did it help them cope in the aftermath of the Holocaust, given that they were able to be active armed resistors? And maybe we'll start with Michael and then hand it over to Professor Porat. And Michael, you're muted if you want to.
I didn't understand very well the question. What is the question? How they compete with life after the Holocaust?
Yes, how might that have helped them or to cope in perhaps a different way than other survivors of the Holocaust might have, given that they had that level of ability to resist?
My mother and my father are completely different person. If she is a fire, is a water. It's very complete. My father has a big idea. He's always thinking about the big things, about Jewish people, about the world, about everything. He sees himself as part of the big movement, not just taking care for the little things. My mother, she's a very practical person, and basically in her heart, she loved the life in a very all part of her body. She's not intellectual, if I can say. And she's very intuitive person. She loves people. She loves children. She loves life. So for her to be in the kibbutz and to be in life again, it was kind of simple. Just it's part of her personality, to be part of life, to be active, to be happy, but for him, he couldn't forget. He always, even if he laughed, even if he was a good father, if he was a good member of the kibbutz, he always carried the big idea. He always carried this duty to remember, to speak for the people who didn't have the voice. For him, it was very important that he will speak for people who wasn't lucky to live after the Holocaust.
Thank you. Thank you. And Professor Porat, how would you would you answer that question? Or do you have anything to add to
Well,
that?
I would go, thank you for whoever asked this good question. I would go another way. I think that the fact that Abba Kovner and Vitka were partisans, and for the other, not only them, but other partisans who survived and came with them to the land of Israel, they were accepted differently by the Israeli public. At the time when they came, late 40s, and the time they started writing, publishing, they were the voice of the fighting Jews, of the partisans, the ghetto fighters. There was no voice yet for the survivors who came out of ghettos, hidings, and certainly not concentration camps. They were regarded at that time, later it changed completely. They were regarded by the Israeli public as less heroic, of course, those who came from the camps in the ghettos. And the admiration and went to the partisans, the ghetto fighters, etc. But Abba Kovner didn't like that. Antik Zuckerman from the ghetto fighters kibbutz also, they didn't like it. Abba Kovner, as we said, and we emphasized it when we wrote the manifesto, that the partisans, the underground, were part and parcel of the Jewish public. It's not to be separated. They expressed the wish of every Jew who could have fought but didn't have the means or the training to do that. For him, this admiration was not in place. He saw himself and the others as one part within the Jewish people.
Thank you, Professor Porat. I just want to add real quickly that in his manifesto, right, at the beginning, where he says, "We shall not go like sheep to the slaughter, let us not go," as you mentioned, Dr. Porat, Professor Porat, that he was identifying not just armed resistance, but everyone. Those words were twisted later to what we call the myth of Jews of sheep to the slaughter. That was not his intention.
Not at all. The opposite. The opposite. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question from Linda Lankowski. She had this comment: they must have felt like a 20th century Cassandra, that they saw before anybody else that the Germans meant a complete destruction of the Jews, and tried to warn people, but it was so unbelievable that, that very few people were able to respond in time before the reality, overcame them. And so the question that I would put behind this, that I would say, is how did they feel at the time, knowing what was happening when other people couldn't give it credence, and perhaps later in life, but especially at the time, knowing what was in store and other people not being able to see it?
I would like to emphasize that they didn't know. It wasn't a matter of information or intelligence that they gathered and they knew for sure that it was a conclusion from facts. No, it was a general thought, a general feeling that was based on what was happening, on the killing one part after the other of the ghetto Vilna population. They sent young members, girls, young members of the movement outside, because a Jewish boy, you take off his pants and he's a Jew. The girls, they dressed themselves as farmers, went around up until Belorussia and came back saying there are no more Jews. But they saw only this part of the world. And when he came to Israel, Abba Kovner was asked, "Gotten you were 23 years old when you wrote it. How did you dare? How did you dare say that there is such a plan when you were closed in your own ghetto and you didn't really have information that told you the Jews from the wall to Portugal would be killed? And he said, yes, I didn't have the exact intelligence or information, but the picture to us was clear. So there is a difference there. Yeah. How did they feel? They felt bad. They felt like ill omen, like a black bird that comes to tell horrible news. They felt terrible, but they carried on telling it.
I would like to add to this that it took the world leaders and Jewish leaders a long time for them to realize that the Nazis are planning to destroy all the Jews of Europe. It took them a long time to sink in. The Allies published their own manifesto on December 17, 1942, in which they said the Nazis are killing many Jews, but they held back from saying that they were planning to kill all the Jews. But the way I see it is like Jews were accustomed to pogroms. So pogroms has a beginning and an end. It lasts a few days and it ends. It's an explosion of rage. But here, what Abba Kovner was seeing, as Professor Porat has pointed out, killings going on and on. The scope of the killings by Einsatzgruppen and others across a vast area, at that time the Soviet Union, but a vast area where people were being killed everywhere, day after day after day. So this was not a localized pogrom. So he had the keen sense to realize that this must be part of a master plan. And that is the ingenuity of Abba Kovner, while other world leaders and even Jewish leaders were saying, well, it's not a complete story.
You know, Mordechai, that Meir Yaari, the leader of his movement, said that in order to write this manifesto, you needed a poet.
Yeah.
You needed a poet with insight, with general understanding, not just a military expert.
Okay,
that's great.
Now I'm going to take the floor back briefly, just to tell you a little bit about upcoming programs of the Susan Mendes Foundation, and then we'll turn back to our panel for their final thoughts. So next week, we are featuring the story of an American, Mildred Fish Harnack, born in Wisconsin, who voluntarily went to Berlin, where she became part of a resistance movement called the Rote Kapelle. And she was the only American ever executed on the direct orders of Adolf Hitler. It's a very profound and important story, and you won't want to miss it. That is a free program. The following week, we are showing something completely different. We are looking at a little known Jewish community in Africa, in the country of Uganda. We have two representatives of two different Jewish communities in Uganda, one an Ashkenazi community that flourished there in the 1940s, and the other a current community that thrives there to this day, a Black African Jewish community that has existed since 1919 and was persecuted under Idi Amin. So that is quite a fascinating subject, and we have the chief rabbi of Uganda who will be one of our panelists. So that's in 2 weeks. It's also a free program. And you'll find information on those two programs and our other August programs in the email you will receive after today's program. So please do sign up. We look forward to seeing you next week and the weeks to come. So now let me turn the floor back to today's moderator, Dr. Mordechai Paldiel.
Okay, so I want to say before asking the panelists some final thoughts, Abba Kovner on revenge. So on his thoughts on revenge and retribution, I wish to point out the following. A year after Abba Kovner published the Resistance Manifesto, a year afterwards, in July 1942, two Jewish underground leaders in a secret meeting outside the Warsaw Ghetto with Jan Karski, a courier of the Polish underground on his way to London, they pleaded with him to relate to the Allies when he arrived in London that they should bomb and destroy German cities and in retribution to what the Germans were doing to the Jews. That's what the specific request. One of the Jewish leaders was from the Bund, Feiner, and the other ones, we think it was Kirschenbaum. So they asked revenge. In other words, if you bomb German cities and you announced by leaflets that this was being done in response to what they were doing to the Jews, maybe that would stop the Holocaust. And at the same time, the Polish prime minister in the government in exile, Sikorski, asked the British to take revenge on Germans living among the Allies, especially German POWs, for what the Germans were doing to the Polish people and the Jews in Poland. This was turned down by the British and the USA as non-democratic. So Abba Kovner was not alone, but he was the first one who was talking about revenge and retribution. Now, my question to all the panelists is as following. In light of the rise, rather surge of anti-Semitism today and anti-Zionism as a cover for anti-Semitism, what is the relevance of Abba Kovner's deeds and thinking today, especially how to respond to this surge of anti-Semitism? This is especially relevant in light of Abba Kovner's sensitivity to the prevalence and continued existence of anti-Semitism, even among those like the Soviet Union who were officially opposed to anti-Semitism would actually practice it, to the extent that in 1953, Stalin even planned to deport Russian Jews to Siberia. So what would Kovner say to us today? To fight back? But how? With physical acts in the sense of retribution or other ways? Michael, please.
I think I'm the wrong person about this subject. I cannot say about my father what he will say. I want to say two things which I educated by it, which I think it's connected to my father's heritage. I educated that all people are equal. All people created by image of God. So the right for everyone to live as a free man, it's a basic right. And if you see a strong man take advantage on the poor man and try to eliminate his right, you have to stand for the poor people, not for the strong person. That's one thing. Another thing I want to say about the resistance. I know maybe Dina will kill me about it, but that's my thought. Abba Kovner called to resist. You have to resist when you see evil. There is other option is to keep silence. And after you keeping silence, you cooperate with the evil. And after you cooperate with the evil, you collaborate with the evil. And to resist, you don't have to be a hero and to have a gun in your hand. If the German force to France education minister to fire all the Jewish teachers, what the other teacher did? Why the other teacher didn't resist? They didn't have to take a gun. They have to resist. That's it. And so in our days, that's what I learned about it. It's very hard to resist against the evil and very hard to don't speak. And don't speak. No, it's easy, don't speak. It's very hard to speak. In Israel, there is a movement which is called Breaking Silence. People who connected to this movement are really can be fired from their position in school or in any position. So to speak, it's not easy. And I think what's happened in the ghetto with the Jewish people didn't accept the Abba Kovner idea, but all the young Jewish movement around the ghettos, not in the Vilna, accept this idea. Why they accepted this idea? I think it's connected to solidarity. They live in a community and they were solidarity. Between them, there was solidarity. And there is two options. One is man to man, a wolf, or you live for yourself and don't care about the other. And the other option is solidarity. And I'm very much for the other option.
Thank you. Professor Barak, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, thank you. Michael, I don't know why should I kill you for saying that. These are excellent and to the point words and ideas. And let me make 2 points. One is that Michael, in his modesty, you asked him to speak about his father and mother, okay? I would like to add a sentence about how Kovner saw him, how Abba Kovner saw Michael. And there are quite a number of references that Kovner made that testify to the fact that he saw in Michael, his firstborn, who was born in 1948. That's the year when the state was born. He saw in him the beginning, the coming of the Messiah, the resurrection, the next generation. And Michael belonged in the army to a very special unit, a very special commando. He was a painter, he's a painter as his father wanted. So Abba Kovner saw Michael not just, I think, not just as a son, but also as what he wanted. There is a beautiful line where Abba Kovner speaks and writes, and he said, I had a gun, I gave it to my son and came to Jerusalem, which means I have someone to continue me, someone else to continue resisting, protecting the Jewish people, etc. So I wanted to say that as well. And Mordechai, you spoke about today's anti-Semitism. Michael spoke about situation in Israel. That's one matter. I think that Kovner would definitely would have been alarmed, but not surprised, because he saw anti-Semitism following World War II, which was after the war ended. It was still rampant, murderous. Jews were astonished to see what was going on after the war, and they said, the war is over, but the Holocaust is not. So I think he would not have been surprised, but he would have been alarmed, and he would have tried to do what against it? To explain how wrong it is, how anti-Semites do not see the Jewish people as it is. Of course not, they see it according to their anti-Semitic imagination. And I think that he would have gone in at least one direction. And this is, he not only did write that he bought Michael a bell to ring. To ring the bell is a warning from what anti-Semitism from other enemies could again do to the Jewish people, and the next generation would protect against it. I think he would have seen how many efforts we today invest in fighting anti-Semitism, in understanding it, in mapping it, in monitoring it. What can I do? I'm doing that for some 25 years. But he would have said, if I may say what he would have said, the great man, that we cannot live by what the anti-Semites think about us, or what they dictate to us as a way of action, that now this is the point and this is what's on the table and we should act against it. I think he would have said, and perhaps I'd like at least to finish with this. The Jewish identity and the Israeli identity as Jewish cannot be built on what anti-Semites are dictating or are saying. Jewish identity is built on long, 1,000 years long tradition, on treasures of Jewish culture, ceremonies, the way he tried to put it in his kibbutz. We should live and build our identity on the positive side, on creativity, on working to better the world. And this should be our identity, and not living up to or living against what the anti-Semites are saying. I hope that I say correctly what Abba Kovner would have said had he been alive.
So now it's my pleasure to thank all of our speakers, our moderator, Dr. Mordechai Paldiel, Professor Dina Porat of Yad Vashem, Michael Kovner, who embodies the spirit of his parents, his noble parents. And on behalf of my co-host, Jonathan First, and of our two organizations, the Susan Mendes Foundation and the Jewish Partisan Educational Foundation, I would like to thank our beautiful big audience today and welcome you next week and in the weeks to come. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody.